Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon from Sharon Z Jewelry, and today I am talking with Imelda from Sunset Shutterbug Studio. Imelda is a product photography coach, and I wanted to talk to her today because I've always struggled with photography. I've been doing it for years, but I'm actually not very good at it. And so I wanted to get her feedback on a couple of my pictures to help make them better. And I know that a number of people in my audience also had questions about photos and how to make them better, how to make the process easier. And so anyway, we're going to talk through some of it. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sharon. I'm excited to chat with you and get into all the things.
Yes, all of the things.
All of the things.
So I had sent this to you and you gave me some really good feedback. And I just wanted to know if you wouldn't mind talking through some of the feedback again.
Yeah, so I really like the kind of creativity that you got in this photo. And one of the things that I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit about in this conversation is the challenge of photographing jewelry, because it can be challenging because it's reflective, right? It kind of acts like a mirror. And you did a pretty good job here of not making your earrings look super reflective here, and a lot of it is because of the angle that you shot it and probably the where the sun was in the sky. So I think you did a really good job here, and I really liked the background a lot. I like the warm earthy tones here, so I applaud you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say capturing small shiny things it's always a challenge in jewelry because it can throw off so much, or you look at the photo later and you're like, the glint obscures the whole piece.
Yeah, it makes it really hard to see. So yeah, you did a great job here. And you have the base in the upper left-hand corner, which is pretty similar to your background, this kind of, brown earthy tone, which is good because even though I see it, I'm not distracted by it, which can happen a lot when you start using props in your photos, is they can take away from the thing you want people to look at. So I really like using props that are sort of in the same color family, but that still make your product stand out. So there's your first sort of thing to think about when you're using props for your photos. So, and the thing about is you're using direct sunlight, which is basically when you're photographing something and there's no clouds in the sky. It's just full on, the sun is out. And when you put anything in front of the sun, you're going to get shadows, very defined shadows, which is what you're getting here. And so I liked the idea that I think you were kind of going for in this photo, but the shadows to me are kind of dominating the photo a little too much for me, because they're crossing over the your earrings, which is, it doesn't look quite the way I would envision it, or I think would really do a good job in highlighting your earrings, right? Because at the end of the day, you always want your photo to always be focused on your subject, which is your earrings or your jewelry piece, whatever. So a couple of things I suggested was to pull up your blinds, because your blinds are creating these shadows.
I was definitely going for some creative artsy look to counterbalance the more neutral palette. Because I appreciate what you said about the kind of it's monochromatic, the background that I'm using, but it's not white gray. It's not totally neutral. Because that's one of the things that I've struggled with branding wise, because I'm my brand tends to be more bright colors. All of my branded colors are bright, strong colors. So I always felt do I really want to go that neutral? But that, I like what you said about the neutrality is okay, because it's a nice warm.
It is.
And it feels more true to what my brand is.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that, white is a really easy go-to background for pretty much any kind of product, especially jewelry, right? Because you want the piece to stand out, and it stands out really easy against white. But it doesn't mean you have to use white for all of your products photos, because having these sort of like warmer colors or just anything that's not white, and you're thinking about, posting it on your website, using it in marketing, on social media, having something that doesn't look, I guess the thing is white can make your product photos look very stale, very kind of not exciting. Your product photos are there to serve a purpose, which is to highlight and show your product. But sometimes you want to not have something that just looks very kind of boring. So using color backgrounds, and the thing that is really good that you did with this is that even though it's a color background, there's a little bit of texture, a little bit of green to it, which is not distracting to me at all, which is very is something that happens a lot when people start incorporating different color backgrounds, especially wood, because isn't this a wood background?
It is literally, this is a wood slab. I'm actually like looking at it over there. So like, just like full disclosure. So this is my jewelry studio behind me. To my right here is the spot where I do most of my like sunlight photography, because there's a window right there, and there's a wood slab that I think I picked up at, I don't know, I want to say like Blick or Utrecht or like Artists and Craftsman Supply. Like it's got raw, like I used to use it for display, but I'm like, now it just like, it's where I photograph some of my jewelry.
Yeah. But it's great because I mean, I know a lot of makers, especially jewelry makers, or I guess however you want to
makers, designers,
designers. Yeah. Using the wood background is super popular, which is popular for a good reason, because it just like looks good and kind of brings this like natural element to it. But a lot of times that wood, the grain and design can be really distracting against anything, but especially with jewelry, because jewelry can be very simple. Like your pieces are very simple, but they have really kind of like subtle, interesting design to it. But other jewelry pieces, I'm thinking about like rings, and has like multiple like gemstones, and like there's a lot that's going on. So if you have that against a background that has a lot going on, it kind of takes away from it. And that's why I really liked this kind of warm, kind of brown tone background that has a little bit of texture, but it's in no way to me distracting away from your piece, which is really great. Like that's major.
but then I also added in like the blind lines, which you were saying is like, that's like, it's sort of like I went like one layer too much.
Well, and the thing is that it's something, photographing with direct sunlight, on a bright sunny day, you can get really dramatic, really beautiful product photos. But the thing is, when you're photographing with direct sunlight, it's really hard to control. It's really hard to control. And it definitely takes practice and some kind of thought, because you have to think about, okay, I want to highlight my products. How do I photograph it in a way that it looks good, right? And that can be really challenging. It definitely takes some work. I know for even me, it's kind of like, ooh, okay, how do I do this? It takes work.
Because I think the reason, like today it's like pretty cloudy, so I actually couldn't get this look at all. But I think, what I was thinking, like my whole thought process was I do kind of like the dramatic shadows to kind of play with. But now I hear what you're saying. It's like, the blind lines, though, it's like, it was like an inch too far, right? Like, so
I basically, in my head, what I was envisioning, I thought, okay, if she wants to do if she still wants to incorporate shadows, which would be really cool, it's like, what can we do in a way to make sure that the earrings are still highlighted, but you still have kind of like a really nice, interesting shadow. So my thought was, okay, what if she were to pull the blinds up almost all the way, but on the kind of upper right hand corner, it would be completely in shadow,
like up here.
So that and then the earrings would be in full sun, so that in a way the shadow on the upper right hand corner, and then even where the vase is on the top left, would create like a frame. It'd be like a nice way to like frame and highlight and draw
Yeah.
draw the viewer's eyes to the earrings. And I had mentioned this in the video that I sent you. I said, this is like super advanced stuff. Like because, and that's the thing is because you have to like really visualize, okay, what am I trying to what could I do to make this better? Or what can I do to achieve this thing that I, want to achieve? And you sort of do have to think about how light works and think about what can I do to like manipulate it in a way to get the photo that I want. So that was sort of like my idea if you wanted to keep with the shadow, playing with the shadow in your photo.
Yeah, and I did. And so I like listened to everything you said, and I wasn't quite able to get the frame, but I wanted to show you.
Yeah.
So this was like what I sometimes do is I do like test runs of my photos, like where I'm like, okay, like I'll take like a bunch of different things. This one, I set it up so the face is a little bit closer. It's still a shadow. And then this is like a chunk of pyrite, which I decided was actually not going to work because you'll notice, so pyrite's super, super shiny.
Yeah,
And what
I
I
see the
found,
reflection.
right? And so what I found is like over time, it's like this reflection down here. I'm like, I keep wanting to use it, but it's super distracting. And so now like that I'm thinking ahead to this, I'm like, okay, so this was, full disclosure, I really took this one like on the fly. I was really just trying to get like the framing and the angle. And, I realized what I can do is I can probably crop it here. Like, especially because a lot of the photos on my website are like a square crop. So if I did a square crop, like I'd be able to like kind of crop it out. But like full disclosure, like, look, I got this totally out of focus.
Okay.
Like, I don't know if you can see like on there, but like one of these is like really nicely in focus. One of these isn't. And the other issue that I had talking about playing with sunlight is that like it reflected the lavender like into the earring.
Yep. That's the thing that happens in photography, is that when you're shooting products, depending on what your product is, if it's reflective, you have to really think about what's around you that could be creating a weird color cast onto your product. Like, so yeah, these are like things to like think about.
It really, like, I honestly didn't even notice it until I pulled the photo up because like, so one of the issues that I've had in the past, I like to frame it that way. Like in the past, I had this problem. In the future, maybe I won't. Is that I get very eager when I'm taking the photos and I don't bother trying to check it. Like, so if I take it with my phone, if I take it with my camera, I don't try to like zoom in and check it before I like declare it done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's always been like I rush the process too much and I'm just like, okay, I took all of my photos. Let's upload them now. And then I'm like, I should have retaken that when I had everything set up.
Yeah. That's one of the things. One of my clients, I had coached, God, was it earlier this year? Through working together, she was saying, I realize how much I rush through the process of photographing my stuff. I don't like slow down. And I think with having, she was practicing and implementing, things she was like learning, she was starting to think a lot more before she took her picture. And so, I think that in itself is a really good thing, is that really like to get really good photos. I mean, there's a lot of like little things to like think about, but really slowing down, because this is what people are going to see. You want it to look the best it can. And that means, kind of thinking through what you're doing, and kind of slowing down and thinking about how you're framing your photo. Like, how do you want, your jewelry to be framed, because that stuff makes a huge difference, and that can also reduce the amount of time you're spending taking pictures and the amount of photos that you're taking, because you're already thinking, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want, let me just take a few more and then like move on to the next thing. So that's a really good kind of awareness that you have.
That's a really good point too. It's like there's like ways in which we always think of ourselves as like, oh, I'm gonna save time if I do this boop 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 like really quickly. And then it's like if I'd slowed down for even a second, like, because now I'm looking at this and I'm like, and I'm looking at all of the ways that I could go back in and edit this. Like I could go into Photoshop, I could sharpen a little bit, I could reduce the color on the earring a little bit, I can crop it, I can do all of this stuff. But like what I'm hearing you saying and what I'm also like thinking through myself is like, if I had taken maybe like 5 extra minutes to like verify that this was the right setup, I would have had something that would need significantly less photoshopping.
Yes, 110%. It's and you're not alone. Like a lot of makers do that. A lot of them are like take their photos and then they go, okay, well, I have to go into Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever editing app and I have to go and fix it. And oh my God, I have to do it for all my photos. And these don't look the way I want, but I need photos. And so it's like, how much work are you spending trying to fix your photos, which, you know, you can only do so much. You can't really, I always say, like, you can't really edit yourself out of a bad photo because it's still just, it's going to look bad. But it's like, when you think about, this is why it's so important when it comes to photographing your pieces, is like really thinking through what you're doing and like learning sort of like the basics about photography. Because when you do, it makes it so much easier and you get better results and you're not spending as much time, you know, trying to Photoshop your photos or feeling like, oh, I don't even want to post these because my product looks better in person than they do in these photos. Which I've heard a lot.
Yeah. And which is like always been, I mean, especially for jewelry people, it's why like for my clients, I'm always like, number one thing you want to do if you sell online is like, make sure you've got like photos of it on a person.
Yeah.
You know, like that's like gotta be number one because customers don't always know like what's the quarter, you know, like that you put a quarter next to something, like they don't necessarily like get that visual reference. So I take most of my, I mean, these days, especially like since the start of the pandemic and I didn't have access to like external models, like I just took the photos on myself. I use my iPhone camera to do it.
Use what you got. Use what you got.
I mean, and I was telling you before all of this, like, this is my camera that I use to take these shots. Like this is, here, wait, I can actually show everyone this is what my setup looks like.
Nice.
This is literally it. Like it's me with like a point and shoot camera. And the thing that I'd learned over time, though I didn't employ it for this photo, is like there is a way to focus, like even with a point and shoot. Like there's like you always have to check the settings on your own camera, but like that was but like my setup is not fancy.
That's the thing, is that the setup, I think, even when I was trying to teach myself product photography, oh my God, my setup was like ridiculous. It looked like, what are you doing over there? I mean, it just looked comical. But over time I realized I don't have to be complicated. Like it doesn't have to be hard, but it took some time to figure that out, because at the end of the day, product photography and coming out with really good photos means understanding how to use your camera to get it to do what you want it to do. And the other thing is like lighting. Lighting is everything. You can, you know, make your product look like you're trying to sell it on Craigslist or like Facebook Marketplace, which we all know sometimes we're like, I don't know, it looks kind of sketchy. I don't know what
that really is. Yeah.
Right. But it's like you're photographing for Etsy, you're photographing, you know,
your
really
website
beautiful pieces. Yeah. And so
you're photographing for your line sheets if you're selling at wholesale.
Exactly, right. You're applying for like craft shows, or you're trying to get in galleries to like to showcase your work. So you have to really think about, you know, it can be really hard to get yourself out of your mind of oh, I'm the person creating and it looks really beautiful, but it's like on the outside somebody's just like looking at it in like 1 second, you know, as they're scrolling on their phone.
Right.
You have to have a photo that really grabs them. And that's why it's so important to really think about how are you presenting your product to your customers, because that's what's going to get them in the, I don't know, virtual door, I guess you could say, you know, and it's such an important, it's like the second most important aspect of your business besides your product, hands down.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's like, Yeah, I agree. I mean, and like photography, like it wasn't an easy thing for me to pick up at all because I'm not like a 2D thinker. Like I make jewelry, so I'm like a 3D thinker.
Yeah, yeah,
And so always trying to like get my images to convey the 3D-ness of what I do has always been like the hardest part. And it's like I also like, frankly, I never took classes, so I don't even know like the terminology. Like sometimes people will ask me what settings I use, and I'm like, I don't know. I set it on my camera like 10 years ago, and then I just like make sure it's focused, and like
yeah,
that's like the extent of my knowledge, really.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
like I had to learn, and basically like what I did is I just learned the settings for this camera. Like if you ask me, I like I'll just be like totally honest because I like being really honest. Like
Yeah.
if you told me that what I needed to do would be to upgrade my camera, I would probably cry because I don't want to have to learn a new camera. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
I'm like, I'm like, no, I know what the settings are on this. Like I will do it eventually, right? But I'm like, I got pretty comfortable with like this camera and how this camera works.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I tell people I'm like, oh, I'm still using like a little point and shoot, and they're like, oh, you're not using like a DSLR, like nope. Like my photo booth, like when I do take white background shots, I just have one of those pop-up tents
Hmm.
and like
Yeah.
one very bright light that goes into it, two very bright lights that go into it. I think it was like $100 on Amazon years ago. Like
Yeah.
it was a very unfancy light box setup. And I was like, I'll just do this. And that's how I've done it with these camera settings. And I'm like, clearly I still need help, but like it is also possible to get some good photos on your own.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you put like, the time and energy and like learning how to photograph your work, you can totally do it. I mean,
Mhm.
when I was an Etsy seller, I was selling photo products, okay? I
Yeah.
was selling photo products and I didn't know anything about how to photograph these things, and to
Oh,
me,
right.
yeah, and I because I was selling like photo greeting cards, I had some like magnets I had made with my photos, I had prints, and I was struggling.
Mhm.
And it was embarrassing because I thought, "Oh, well, here I am selling like, photos." And I'm like, how do I even take a picture of these things,
How do you take a picture of a picture? But it's like,
Yeah.
like it's interesting to hear you say that because like when I way back in the day, like in 2003, when I took my first like jewelry classes, and I was asking a friend of mine who was like taking photo class, I was like, "Can you photo jewelry?" She was like, "I think so," and then like they tried it, and it was like it did not turn out well because
No.
like small product photography is totally different than like landscape photography than
Oh,
like
yeah, it's
people photography
different.
like and even like I know people who have gone through like the process of trying to find like models for a photo shoot for jewelry, and if the photographer isn't used to shooting even like a ring on a hand,
Yeah,
it like it's a specialty in a lot of ways like that
it
we've
is.
all had to learn on our own, but but yeah, but it's definitely like a special like so I guess what I want to convey is that like if you're frustrated with this process, just know that like professionals are also frustrated with this
Oh,
process
yeah.
at times.
I
Yeah.
mean, I do watch, I watch videos from like professional product photographers, people who like
Hmm.
shoot for like huge brands and whatever, charge zillions of monies for, one
Yeah.
photo. But it showed me, I mean, even they have trouble photographing reflective stuff.
Yeah.
Like reflective stuff, I remember because actually one of my clients um had reflective pieces, and we were working through it, trying to get her to get some like really good photos, and I said, just so you know, maybe this will make her feel better, but it's like you are learning something that's really hard. Like even
Right.
professionals find this challenging, so the fact that you're just somebody who's just now like learning how to do this, know that this isn't hard just because you're kind of new to this is hard in general.
Yeah.
So if you have trouble photographing your stuff and it's like pretty reflective, like you are not alone, like professionals struggle
Nope.
with it. So
I remember being told that in like early jewelry classes, and like my instructors would show me what their setups were. And this is back in the days like before digital photography. So you couldn't also
yes.
like zoom. Like the one thing that I have like really tried to train myself on is that there is a way for me to zoom in on the photos on the camera. So like um Yeah, so I don't like rush the process. I like remember to look to make sure like it's in focus. This is back in the days when it was like film.
Oh,
right?
I took film classes.
Oh
yes.
yeah. And
Yes.
like for them to have like a jewelry product photo turn out blurry later was like because the setup that you have to use was like the light box. And then you would have a white sheet covering the opening that would have one circular cutout for the lens, because on like some really super reflective jewelry pieces, you actually get your own reflection in it if you take it from like the wrong angle. And I was just, I do remember at the time, like, this is like almost 20 years ago. And I was so intimidated. I was like, I'm not going to know how to do that. And now it's like, thankfully, like the tools have gotten a little more accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and the thing is that, I think the thing to always remember is, yes, having really great quality photos is really going to be a game changer for your business.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing too is you have to remember, you don't have to be a professional here.
No,
you don't have to be a professional and stress yourself out to the point of like, it needs to look amazing. And it's, you don't, you're not, unless you're trying to like, make a portfolio of your product photos so you can, shoot other people's stuff,
Yeah.
Cool. That's another level. But it's like, you just need to know how to photograph your own stuff so you can, sell it online. So don't feel like you need to be a professional at this.
I think that's a really good point, because also for a lot of folks in sort of the handmade individual designer maker realm, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're going for, okay, so like the business side of me is like, okay, so if you're going for like the high end, I was going to say Barney's, but Barney's is no more. What's another high end store? Like, is Neiman Marcus still around? I can't remember. But if you're going for like that section of the industry, then yeah, you're probably going to need to send your photos out to be done by a professional.
You hire a professional.
Right. But for us individual designer makers, the handmade nature of what we do, the personalized nature of what we do, the scrappy nature of what we do is actually why people are shopping with us in the first place. So it's like, it's like having it look good in focus, in context, really important. But I like what you're saying. It's like, it doesn't have to, you're not a professional photographer. So your photography is going to be about you.
Yeah. It's like,
I'm not a professional photographer. So my photography is going to be more about like me and my style.
Yeah. And my thing is like, I love that you use a point and shoot camera, because I use a point and shoot camera too.
Oh.
So I'm not over here. My husband has a DSLR camera, and I actually haven't shot with that one yet. I shoot my videos with it, but because like when I decided to try to figure out this whole photography thing, see if I could actually do it, I thought, let me just use what I have. Like, let me see. And I'm not a fancy person. Okay. I'm not over here like, okay, I need to buy all these things. Like, I didn't buy anything other than like some seamless paper. Like, that's really all I bought when I was just first like trying to figure out what in the world I was doing. But yeah, I just used my point and shoot camera, which I don't know, now is probably like 5 years old, maybe 6 years old. I mean, it's not new. And yeah, a lot of the stuff is so much not your equipment. Like it's not. And I think, and I know that happens in that a lot of, makers will think, oh, I got to go buy this. I got to go buy that, but that. If I can do it with just basic stuff around the house, like it's so comical, like the things I use. Like, what do I got? Can I use that? Let me see if that works, And the thing is it doesn't. It was like my setup is like so whatever, it's like low cost. You use whatever I had around. Because I wanted to prove that, okay, I can do this. Like, I want to prove that I don't have to have a fancy setup. I want to prove that I don't have to go buy all this other stuff, because at the end of the day, photography, not just product photography, photography is just about playing with light. And when you know how light works and what you need to do to get it to do what you want, because really it's playing with light and manipulating it. So whether you're photographing a person, whether you're photographing some, beautiful fall day, you you can manipulate it in a way, or you have to like, do something different on your end to get it to do what you want, and you can get really good results. And I think for me, I really learned how important understanding light is to achieve the photos that you want, because your photos can look super like, I just like threw this together kind of thing. And, I
Yep.
wasn't really thinking about it. Or you can make your photos look like you're a professional, even though you're not, and I
Totally.
think
Yeah.
that's what I really realized. I'm like, holy crap, how did I get this photo? Like, I need to do this again, But it's like, I didn't have like a, complicated setup, but it's just like having the knowledge and going, okay, this is where I need to be, and this is, whatever. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that, because a lot of the times, like what I'm often telling, like even like my jewelry like students, like the people learning jewelry skills, is like, you don't actually have to start off with like thousands of dollars in equipment for anything.
Yeah.
Like I've had some of my tools for like the entire 20-ish years that I've been metalsmithing, and like they don't need to be replaced, and like they might have been like the most basic tool, but I've figured out how to use it for what I make. And
Yeah.
it's like, and if you can figure that out, then like the upgraded tool is like, it's fine, but it doesn't necessarily like help you make jewelry any better. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there was there's a few different like schools of thought on this. One school of thought is that like, oh well, if you've got the right tool in place, like you're halfway there to like making your jewelry.
Mhm.
And then like another metalsmithing instructor of mine one time was like the tool matters less than you do. Right? Like the tool
Yeah.
itself is like not as important as what you are able to do with the tool. And I just like, and I appreciate like both perspectives,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
like I was saying, it's like, you could give me a DSLR camera and I'm not necessarily going to take better photos, 'cause I won't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And whereas and I feel that way about some of my jewelry tools. Like you could give me like the upgraded tool, but if I don't know how to use it, or if it doesn't serve a purpose for me
Yeah.
outside of like a particular use, then it's like it doesn't really do me any good. And for me, like the camera, I was like, well, this was my vacation camera for years. This is now my vacation camera, right?
Yeah.
And it can also serve a purpose of like, I mean, I think actually, let me go back to, okay, so this was with the point and shoot.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but let's see. This one was with the point and shoot, but this one originally, this was with my iPhone.
Yeah. Phones
They,
right now have really great cameras.
they're
Like,
so great.
it's mind-boggling how good they are now.
And you can get it to like focus really easily. Like the focus in these, to me, like the focus in this photo, like the focus on this is sharp because it's like in the foreground.
Yeah.
Focus on this is a little less because it's in the background, which is like the perspective. But it's like, yeah, I got that with an iPhone, and that's just what my new iPhone does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of like equipment and stuff, so like some of my followers also had their own questions, which we've touched on a little bit, but
Mhm.
so I'm gonna start off with a few of like the easier questions, and I'm gonna leave the branding one like to the very end because
Okay.
it's one of the more like nebulous ones. But a number of people really wanted to know like some of the nuts and bolts, like lighting, focus, angles, right? Like, and I know you
Yeah.
kind of touched on like what makes for good lighting, but besides like what we were talking about with sunlight, do you have any other like recommendations or?
I would say, I would say it's going to be a little tricky depending on what kind of jewelry somebody has.
Mhm.
That's the kicker, because somebody set up that has pretty reflective jewelry is going to be different than somebody who doesn't.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's the thing to always remember, is there's no one size fits all when it comes to like your setup for photography, for product photography, because not every product is the same, you know.
Yeah.
So I would say with when it comes to reflective, if you have like very reflective jewelry pieces like you do,
Mhm.
um, I encourage you to really, move around when you're
Mm.
thinking about where you want to take a picture from. thinking about where you're getting less reflection versus more reflection, and using that information to tell you where a better position is to take a picture. Because obviously you don't want to take a picture when there's a lot of reflection happening, because you might not be able to really see your piece. So that might be the sign, okay, don't take a picture from that angle. But, you know, move around, and I really encourage you to really observe light, because when you observe light, observe, I'm like tripping on my words here, observe light, the more you can kind of see what it does. So even just like your home, kind of notice the way the light changes throughout the day. And I have actually a post on my website where I kind of walk you through different exercises you can do to better kind of understand light. Which I would encourage everybody just to like try, so that you can really start understanding what's going on, and how you can improve your setup for your own products. But yeah, I would really encourage you to just like really start observing how light changes throughout the day, especially if you're using natural light, which a lot of people are using, because it's easily accessible. The other thing is to use the same light source. So if you're if you're photographing your products on a bright sunny day, try and keep that as your kind of go-to, because the light changes, right? Because we all know golden hour, right? During the day, like as the sun's setting, the color looks different. Everything looks a little warmer, and so on. So
and I think this was afternoon. Yeah, I think this was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I will also say, like, for when I have to do my white background in the tent photos, like you can't see it really, but this is my like very bright.
Okay.
I can't remember what I wish I could remember what kind of bulb it was, but it's like it's like a bright. It's meant to make things look like very white, but that's
like
just
daylight, a daylight bulb maybe.
Yeah, but it's like it's the one that I only use for my white background images.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, this was definitely like afternoon sunlight.
Yeah, so I would encourage, I would say try and keep your lighting as consistent as possible, because that will make your photos look pretty consistent, right? Because there are times where I look at product photos, especially jewelry product photos, where the piece is photographed in, you know, outside, and the sun is just like right on the piece, and the gemstones and everything are a different color, and then they photograph it in their house or in the shade, looks completely different. So you want to make sure that what you're putting out, especially with jewelry, is consistent, so that the person gets it. Because I have heard stories that customers will complain saying, oh, well, this isn't, I thought it was going to be dark, or it looks brighter, or it looks darker. And one thing I did see from somebody who had photographed their pieces, and the jewelry, the colors were just like all over the place. And they basically said that I guess there's the stones that they use do change. And so I said, well, if that is the case, then I would explicitly say in your product photos, hey, it looks like this and this kind of light, so that the customer won't be surprised when they get your piece and, go,
and then they're like, what is this?
Yeah.
Well, like how I've had to manage that too is because there are a lot of especially sapphires can be color changing. Or like depending on the angle. So what I have done, and sometimes what I've done, sometimes I forget or decide to skip it. But what I always advise my clients to do is that if that's the case, like you might have to take it in multiple lights to show them what it looks like. Like this is what it looks like under like a light bulb, and this is what it looks like outside, and this is what it looks like in direct sunlight. Like I had to do that for a customer sapphire recently, because it was like every light, it was like, it was teal, it was blue, it was green. And I'm like, here's what to expect.
Yeah. And I think that also brings up a good point of, if you have the option, which I know for Etsy, and I'm sure on Shopify and like some other platforms where you can sell your products, if video is an option, shoot the
Mm,
video. Shoot the video and show your piece with the different lighting, and just
yeah.
show it, because people want to see what it looks like in real person, and to me,
Yeah.
that's going to be a really great option, is showing the video, because that gives them a more realistic perspective of your piece than in your photos. I mean, photos are great, right? But
Yeah.
video kind of doesn't lie, I mean, unless you're like some fancy like video
Right.
editor and stuff, but
Which I'm not yet.
yeah,
I'm better at photo editing than video editing.
yeah,
But yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, like video, not everybody has the capability, but I know like Squarespace has a video option now, on some platforms, depending on what
yeah,
template you're using, I think. But yeah, Shopify has a video option, Etsy has a video option. Like, and you can always do do a video and turn it into a GIF or a GIF.
yeah,
I think it's a GIF, but I always called it GIF. But you
yes,
can always like turn it into that too, maybe. And then
mm-hmm.
like, especially for those color changing stuff in jewelry, which is like a really big thing, right? Like,
Yeah, it
especially like
really is.
metal colors can actually look different in different lights. Like golds can look more gold or more rosy.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I would think in general, for the most part, try and keep your photos pretty much consistent. And if you do have pieces that do dramatically change depending on the
Mm-hmm.
lighting, you could even do like a photo collage and have like
Mm-hmm.
one image show,
Ooh.
what the product looks like in a couple different settings, but making it explicit so that
Mm-hmm.
the customer knows going in, oh, it's going to look like this and different, because people don't like to be surprised when they buy
No,
things online.
no.
So if they don't want that, then maybe they need to buy something else,
Right,
so,
right.
but it's another thing that also just highlights how unique your piece is, right? Because some people be like, oh my God, this, like, I love it. And oh my God, that, like, I'm sold. Like, to
Like it gives them
see
a
that.
story and you're giving them like a visual story too by showing like boop boop boop, like here's all four
Yeah.
ways that this garnet's going to look different. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Really good
that's
point.
something, if, a jewelry, if a piece of jewelry does have that, make sure you're very clear about that up front. But use it as a unique selling point for your
Mhm.
pieces.
So, okay, so what I'm hearing from you on lighting is like play around first of all. Like
Yeah.
literally shift things around and also get to know like the light in your space. And I will say like, and because you said it and then I was like, oh wait, I actually did that. I just didn't know that I'd done that. But like I had observed when I first moved my studio home, I had observed that like, oh, this section gets like good direct light, like right here. And
Yeah.
I did wait a little while till I started taking like sunlight photos. But then once I was like, oh, I've already like figured out times of day when it will be like
Yeah.
hitting
Good point.
directly.
Mm-hmm.
And then my only enemy then is the fog and and
Yes.
then the cloud cover. But
But fog, I mean, I live in fog too. I probably live
yes,
in more fog than you do.
probably.
Um, your product will look different when it's a cloudy day.
Yeah.
And there's some definite advantages of shooting on a cloudy day, just because
Mm,
you get the diffuse light, which can
yeah.
help with glare. So doesn't necessarily eliminate it, but it can help reduce glare problems that you might deal with direct sunlight,
That's a really good point,
happening.
especially for us in the Bay Area where like we get plenty of overcast days, or like if you're in like Seattle or
Yeah.
Portland, you get plenty of overcast days. Like you might be able to take advantage of the overcastness to get your jewelry pictures. That's
Yes.
really, yeah. So, okay, so like no specific lighting, but definitely get to know your product and test it
Yeah.
out in
I
different
think,
lights. I think that's
yes.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other questions that came up a lot was around focus. Because I'm just going to go back to my images. So like the reason why I got this one in focus is because I took it on my iPhone and I zoomed in to
Okay.
make sure. And then I I'm guessing everybody knows that you can tap on the camera to get it to focus where you want it to focus.
Yeah. So when it comes to focusing on your camera, so whether you're using a point and shoot camera, a DSLR, or your phone, which I'm sure a lot of people are mostly going to be using their phones, is when you bring up your app to take your photo, is tapping the screen where you want the camera to focus. So
Okay,
when
so
you
I don't know
tap
if you can see like that square.
Not
Kind
yet. I
of.
don't think it's showing up.
Oh,
But
there. Yeah. But okay, there it
oh,
goes. Like
there
when
it
I
is.
tap. So where I
Yes.
tap is where it's focusing.
Yeah.
Just
So
in case nobody knew that. But yeah. But
yeah.
actually, but I
So
think that there are a lot of people who don't know that like you can, but like I've shown that to people and they're like, I didn't know that that was an option. But
yeah, and that's the thing is, yeah, I had a client who didn't know either. So,
mhm,
you
yeah.
tap the screen in your the app for your to take photos, because that'll help it focus. There's also options depending on your phone or the
Mhm.
app you're using on your phone, where you can manually focus or
Hmm.
autofocus. So if so okay, so yeah, that's one thing, is if you're not tapping your screen on like where you want the camera to focus, you might end up with blurry photos. So
Yeah.
to me, always tap the screen on your phone.
Mhm.
But if you're using a point and shoot camera or a DSLR camera, again, there's going to be options for manual and autofocus usually.
Mhm.
So the way, again, it's the tapping the screen, but there's also when you press down on the shutter button before you take your photo, usually cameras will start to focus. So
This
if,
one. Yeah.
yeah, so if you start pressing down, if you press down too quick, it may not have there might not be enough time for your camera to focus, so you can get blurry photos that way too.
Mm.
So you need
So is that specific to like all point and shoots, or is that do you think people should maybe look up the instructions for their particular camera?
I mean, I would recommend what if you're using an actual physical camera, I always recommend understanding how to use your camera and understand
Mhm.
how it works. But generally from the cameras I've used is when you're pressing down the like the shutter button, your camera, you'll hear it. It'll start to you'll hear like a focusing, like a noise, and
Yeah.
that's where your camera is getting in focus on whatever it is that you're having it focus on.
Mhm.
And sometimes you do it too quickly, it won't focus, so you'll get a blurry photo. So yeah, I mean, everybody should educate themselves on how to use their camera and what the features are so that you're familiar with how to change settings. But it's the same idea of just, making sure that your what you want in focus is in focus. The
Mhm.
other thing that I also notice that some people have trouble with when they are trying to focus, trying to take their pictures and they're getting blurry, is if you're too close to the thing you're photographing, your camera might not be able to get in focus. Like you might be too close for the range of
Oh.
your lens.
Oh.
So you
Okay.
may need to actually like step back, or
Huh.
like zoom out or whatever, because that I notice a lot with phones is, I mean, they have really awesome lenses,
They
but
do.
they can only do so much. Like unless you have a macro lens, like on a actual like DSLR camera, they can only do so much. Like they're
Yeah.
like, we can't photograph, a quarter of an inch away from the thing you want us to, take
Right.
a picture of.
Right.
So you need to step back.
And
Um,
one of the things because I did used to make that mistake, I was like, I better be like right up on top of it. And like what it resulted in blurry photos. And so what
yeah,
I realized at one point is I needed to scooch back a little bit. And I crop most of my photos anyway, because I do a square crop on my website. So I'm like, if
yeah,
it's really like too far away, I can always like that's a simple
yeah,
like Photoshop fix.
yeah. The other thing too is that my like number one thing for equipment, like I don't really recommend a lot of equipment, but
Hmm.
the one thing that I always tell um, every person that I talk to when they're talking about product photography is you really need a tripod. Like a tripod
Ooh.
gives you the stability to take your photos, because when
So
you're
not
trying,
freehand like this.
well, the thing is, there's a lot of good reasons to have a tripod. One is it
Mhm.
just, you don't have to keep picking up and
Mm,
setting down your camera or your phone every time you need to take a picture or you're trying to adjust things, because chances are it's going to be really hard for you to get to the same position
that's
every
a
time
good
you take a
point.
photo. So if your camera is stationary and it's not moving, you reduce the risk of having to get blurry photos, which happens, especially if you're really close and you're breathing, which we all are pretty much breathing,
Yeah.
right? Because when you're breathing and you're taking a really still, like a close-up photo, it can, you shake,
Yeah.
so that can result in a blurry photo. So having a tripod to me makes photographing your work so much easier. And I know that will kind of go into another question I know, like
Mhm.
you we're gonna talk about,
Yeah.
but it just makes it so much easier to make adjustments to your product without having, like, your hands are free. So
Yeah.
hands down, like, I think that's like the number one thing everybody should be having. If they're photographing their own work, like, you should get a tripod. Like, they don't cost that much. You could probably find one that a friend or somebody's not using. You could probably find one for free. I
And you
mean,
can get those like short ones, like I can't remember what they're called, but they've got the like manipulatable
oh, I
legs
hate
and
those.
stuff. You hate those? Okay. Oh no, that's good.
Well, that's the thing, is that those are probably great for like outdoor,
Oh yeah.
photography, or like, video, stuff that you're shooting anywhere. They are super limiting, and
Mm,
you really need the height. So having a
mm,
tripod where you have extendable legs that you can really,
mm-hmm.
make it as tall or as short as you want is really good. And yeah, because it you can't get the height, you can't really do much when your tripod is only like 6 inch, has only 6 inch legs.
Right.
So if you're
You
gonna
would do
buy
like
one,
okay, so like in this setup here, so like obviously like the floor is, I'm standing.
right?
And this is like the edge of the table. So you're talking about like a tripod that would like stand on the floor
Yeah,
somewhere over
yeah.
here, as opposed to like not even a tabletop tripod.
I wouldn't even do the tabletop. To me, I'm like, if
Wow.
you're gonna
Okay.
buy one, get one that has legs, because you're gonna get so
Okay.
much more flexibility.
I'm like,
And
I might actually have like a spare one actually now that because I had it for like another
yeah,
light that I think I can just swap it. No,
yeah.
actually, like this is inspiring me because it's like, well, so okay, so one of the questions was, what can you do to make all of this easier?
Get a
And
tripod.
get a tripod. Well, but what I'm also hearing is
There's
that like
more.
the reasons why it makes it easier is that like you don't have to like reset the angle or like okay,
Yeah.
so like I have this photo of me like taking a picture manually like, with no tripod. And like the thing that's tricky about this is like what if I had to take pictures of like 6 pairs of earrings and I
Hmm.
want it all at the same angle with all of the same lighting. And it's like
Yep.
when I do it like this, I've made it harder on myself
Yep.
because I'm having to go back to the last photo, look at what that was, and then like
Yeah.
extrapolate that forward. But if I had the tripod, I would just like, not
Do it
do
real
that.
fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
You switch it
No.
out. You can have all
Mm-hmm.
your earrings already set up on the side,
Mm-hmm.
out of frame. You have your shot already set up and framed.
Mm-hmm.
You can, one little here's a little trick you can use. Especially with jewelry pieces or small pieces, getting like a chopstick and using
Oh.
that to like adjust, because you know how jewelry pieces, like, you
Yes.
don't want fingerprints on your stuff. You don't want it to get all
No.
like, so that's another thing. Clean your jewelry before you even photograph it. Like,
Okay,
clean it.
that is a real thing because I
Yes.
have found fingerprints on my like I took a picture of some like shiny gem and
Yeah.
there was like my thumbprint like right in the middle and I was like, oh,
Yeah,
like
get a
why?
microfiber cloth or whatever you
Yeah,
use to clean it.
that's
Clean it, make
correct.
sure it looks good, make sure it's ready for its photo, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
this is what people are going to see. People don't want to see like fingerprints and like dust and little things on your photos. So clean your product before you photograph it. And
Yep.
then, yeah, using like a chopstick so you don't have to like touch your stuff. and you can just get the chopstick and adjust it and you can be looking at your camera and making sure that you have it wherever you want. Yeah, tripod's kind of amazing. Like
All right.
it'll save you a lot of time.
I think you've just talked me into using a tripod, because I'm also like starting to envision, like when I have to do my white background photography, I would just pull the tent like up to the edge and set the camera like probably like closer to here, because I like to take it a little more like straight on or straight up and down, right? But I could have it, I would just have to pull the tent forward. Whereas before, like I've had it, like this is inspiring me to make my life easier. So thank you.
And the other thing too you can do, which I decided to do because I wanted more flexibility, and this might be something especially for any jeweler out there. If you can, I would invest in a tripod where you can have the arm be horizontal so you can do flat lays.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
They do cost more, but to me, again, it just adds even more flexibility.
Yeah.
And if you're photographing pieces, you know, like these earrings, you can only angle your camera down so much when you're just using a tripod that's just a standard, you know, vertical arm. But if you are willing to invest in one that gives you the horizontal option, to me, like I use that quite a bit, and it's just nice having that option. Yeah, tripods, like to me, a no-brainer. Like you need to get one.
That's, I mean, and I like this because like, you know, I've been talking about like what tools are really necessary, and it's like, yeah, like the camera like might matter less than whether or not you have the right tripod, but you can that will help. Like it's a tripod that's going to help you be consistent, because you can get a tripod for an iPhone, or that fits an iPhone.
Yeah, or you can get one. There's tons now on the market for phones, for whatever phone you have. Just make sure it's stable. you know, make sure.
You're saying not the I can't remember what it is, but it's the one with like the bendy. Yeah. So leave those for your outdoor vacation shots.
Yes, or like your whatever, your really cool reel. I mean, I don't know, you can use it for reels or something. But yeah, to me, get the tripod that has extendable legs that can really like it can go on the ground and give you the height that you need. Because I just, to me, that if there's one thing you're gonna like spend money on, like equipment,
that would be it.
Tripod. It's a tripod. Yeah.
I think you've convinced me. If you were a tripod salesperson, I would be purchasing your tripod right now.
One of my clients was so resistant. She's like, I don't know why I don't want to use it. And then she finally decided to use, because she had a tripod, and then she was like, okay, I get it. Like, I get it. I'm going to use it from now on.
It's sort of like I'm resistant to the very idea of like upgrading my camera to have to relearn all of those settings, but relearning with a tripod sounds accessible to me. So, that's a good one. Okay, so I've got a few more questions, and I know a couple of these I was maybe going to answer. Like, so one of the questions that came up a lot is, how many photos do you need? And I've always told my clients, I'm like, at the most basic, you need 3. You need a photo of it on a person, even if that person is you. White background photos. So the other question that came up, but which I'll address right now too, is like, are white background photos still needed? And the answer is, for a lot of uses, still yes. So usually I'm telling my clients, I'm like, you need a white background photo on a model, and then some kind of like editorial in context. So like, that's why I did like these wooden board shots. And the reason why, and I'll just like, side note, the reason why white background is still relevant is that a lot of press, like if you're going to try to like aim for like fashion blogs, jewelry blogs, magazines, white background might still be really relevant, especially for like old school, like published magazines and newspapers, gift guides. And the reason is that for anybody trying to do like a layout of multiple like things, like pretend it's a gift guide and they're trying to do a layout of like 10 different gifts, white background image is so much easier to crop into that than anything else, because they don't have to like crop around like your contextual photos. And so white background is still relevant. So that's what I tell my clients, but 3 is like, I always also say it's the minimum.
Yeah. I would say, and I agree with you on the white background. Kind of like I said before, pretty much anything looks good against a white background.
Yeah.
For good reason. It's not distracting. It's very clean, very easy on the eyes. I mean, there's a reason why you can spend hours browsing Amazon because everything's photographed on a white background. They have very specific criteria on anybody who wants to sell on there. It's like, you probably need to have a white background. And, also that's something to kind of think about from a user perspective, or, your customer perspective, is that having that white background makes it real easy for them to focus on your product.
Right.
Try scrolling through search results on Amazon and then scroll through search results on Etsy. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
It's like a very different experience. And, I get more visual fatigue scrolling on Etsy because every photo is different. Everybody's doing all these things. And you can scroll on Amazon and you're like, oh, I have 20 things in my cart and stuff, So,
right.
Because it's just easy. It makes it a more friendly shopping experience. So timid white backgrounds and just simple backgrounds, hands down, are always going to be, I think, important. If you're looking to really grow your business, and even, if you're going to do like Amazon handmade or something, or, even doing Google ads, if you want to run ads to your website, I think that they require white backgrounds. So
I think you're right. I think I haven't looked at, so my lead images, I think for almost all of my products are always white backgrounds, because kind of for the reasons that you stated, because it makes for a really nice scrolling experience through a website. Like, it makes it more seamless. But I hadn't even thought that for Google, like for relevancy, I think they do for ads prioritize white background images, or at least like monochromatic background images. I know some fashion is like a gray, what did you call it? The seamless paper? Yeah.
Just like very like kind of like pastel, very kind of like how you had like, very kind of like neutral background. So, that's the kind of stuff. I mean, you have to think about, I think when it comes to like how many photos, you really need to put yourself in the place of your customer. You need to really think about, okay, this person hasn't seen my product in person, or they can't. What information and what angles, what shots do they need to know so that they feel like, I have a really good idea of what this product is and I'm willing to give you my money? Especially with jewelry. Jewelry is not necessary, everybody's got different price points, but if you're selling like jewelry that's like, I don't know, $500 or even more, whatever, your photo really all of your photos really need to show your quality and show the craftsmanship of your work, and really just make it easy for them to say, take all my money,
Right. Right.
So
because I think of it too, it's like, like somebody, like I always do, like, at least like for a ring, I always do like one like front image, right? But also probably like a side image to see, like, if it's like, especially if it's like a signet ring, like, is there a transition to something narrower, to a taper? Like, what does it look like from the back? Is it totally solid? Is it like, and even if those, and sometimes for me too, like, even if those images aren't necessarily as like fancy, like those might not be the stylized images, but it's like the informational images, right?
It is. At the end of the day, your photos are there to communicate information to your customers. So it's cool. It's really great if they're really pretty and like stylized, right? But at the end of the day, they need to communicate information. They need to communicate how big is your piece. And as you said, like, what is it going to look like on me? So having it on me, is the necklace going to fall on me at like a weird point on me? Are the earrings,
how far
than
do they stand out?
Like these are really important things. Because sometimes people, I mean, at least from what I've seen, and I mean, you can totally like let me know if this is true or not. Not every jeweler out there will take refunds. right?
It's
From
true. Yeah.
pieces, right? So you want to make sure that they have what they need so that they're not saying, hey, can I get a refund? Like this is way smaller or
Yeah.
too big or something.
No, the communication aspect, because I also always like counsel my clients. I'm like, you have to list sizes for all aspects of your jewelry because the difference between like 2 millimeters and 5 millimeters is actually kind of big in jewelry. Like, you need to convey like this is the size of the stone because they also might be comparing it to something else.
Yeah.
And having
Yeah.
those dimensions, but like the dimensions only go so far, right? Because some people might be like, okay, I'll sit there with a measuring like a ruler and I'll measure the 5 millimeters on. But what helps too is like just a picture of the ring on a finger for context, right? And I do not have pretty nails. I have jeweler's nails. The jeweler's manicure is what we always call it because we're all like sitting there with files and like hammers and stuff messing with our nails. But I will take like I'll kind of cover up my nails, but I will just take a picture of the ring on my finger. And like I've been able to take it on other people's hands too, which has been great. Some people have loaned me their hands. But it's like you just need to like what it really needs to convey is this is what this particular ring looks like on a real human finger.
Yeah.
And I'm not even that picky about it being on like somebody's very nice hands because everybody wears rings. And so I kind of like one of the things like, and I guess this kind of like leads us into like the branded part of the conversation, like how do you convey branding? But for me, it's always been very important for me to show that like my jewelry could be for anyone. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about having like perfectly airbrushed youthful hands because like, look, I wear rings and I'm like 47 years old. I'm like, I don't have perfectly airbrushed hands. I never have. Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really important with branding to show like a more like hyper realistic context. Cause I'm like, I want you to know that this jewelry is for you too. And so that because it's a core part of my brand, like
I love that.
That's something that I want to convey. Like I want to show it on what a real person would look like and not something airbrushed. But everybody's got a different brand. So I guess I'll ask you is like one of the questions that came up was like, how do you kind of like convey branding in photography or how do you even like decide what your branded photography looks like? I know this is like a huge question too. This is probably the biggest, we're saving it to the end because it's like the biggest question, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really big question. Because I think on some level, your branding and how you present yourself, you want it on some level to be recognizable, right? You want people to see your photos and go, oh, I know that's Sharon. Like that is Sharon's stuff. Like I could, pick that out from like a lineup or something. So branding's really important to your business. And the other thing too is that your branding can change. Your branding, because like maybe what you had in the beginning of your business is not something you are wanting to use now, right? And I think that's something to always think about is that sometimes you might have to change what your brand is because it's not where you are anymore in your business. So I would really think about branding. This kind of goes back to making your photos look consistent about using the same backgrounds. If you're using different, I mean, there are some people who, use different backgrounds, but there's a cohesiveness to it.
Like a theme kind of?
Yeah, like there's just like a look and a theme. And, there's like one jeweler that I know specifically. Her pieces are pretty colorful anyway. She uses very colorful backgrounds, but they work because that's her brand.
Yeah.
And so I could recognize her stuff from anybody. And so, she decided to go that route because she's just all about color. She wants very like vibrant, in your face. I mean, her brand is like, you don't get my stuff if you don't want color, we're just very like kind of, out there pieces. So I think, kind of like the thing I would consider, and I even had to think about this for my own like website, because I redid my website and I really had to think about, well, what are other people doing in the sense of what are other people doing that I don't like?
Right.
know?
That can be that can be really powerful too. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes because I think like years ago, like even before I started my own business, and I was like, branding, what? Like I don't like branding, but it was really that I didn't like certain companies
Hmm.
branding. And I was like, and it took me a while to realize like that was sort of instructive for me too. It's like,
Yeah.
well, your branding doesn't have to be like company X if you don't identify with that, but like you have to
Right.
determine what yours is because you do still have
Hmm.
to be branded.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's right. I think it's being aware of what you don't like. What don't you want to go? And I know for like me, there were certain colors that I thought, I don't want to see that color. I don't want to ever, know that
Mm-mm.
that color exists. It's like banned from my world. Like I'm not going to be including that in any way. So you kind of have to think about, what don't you like when it comes to other jewelry brands? And you can look at, people, on Etsy or even like large brands. You can look
Yeah.
at really large brands and think about, okay, I really like this, or oh God, I hate that. I'm like not going to do that. So that can really help you um, get a better idea of like what you might be going for, and to really think about, what do you want your pieces, like who's your customer? Are your
Hmm.
customers, I don't know, like the Real Housewives or something?
Yeah.
Or are they, very like outdoorsy people,
Hmm.
and think about, well, like, what does that mean? Um, what colors do I really like? Do I want to use a lot of like kind of earthy tones, kind of like how you
Hmm.
did? Or do I want to use, um, like really colorful backgrounds and things and make that, and that complement your pieces,
Yeah.
right? Because you have to always make sure that your pieces are always going to stand out in your photos. So even if you're using really colorful backgrounds, make sure that those backgrounds are not going to be competing with your pieces, and be consistent. I think,
Hmm.
because one of the questions was, how do you make this process easier? How do you make the whole process of photographing your pieces easier? And it's having that plan of, hey, these are my props that I'm using, these are my
Hmm.
go-to props, this is my background, or whatever. These are the angled shots I get from all my pieces. All of that adds, I think, to your branding. It's all that
Hmm.
it's, and it also helps you really think about photographing your stuff, right? It makes it easier. It takes the
Yeah.
guesswork out of, okay, well, what background am I going to use today? Maybe I'll try this. Maybe I'll try that. And it's like, no, make it easier on yourself. Stick to like one or two backgrounds and have the same type of shots in each,
Yeah.
listing for like your earrings or your necklace, so that, when a customer goes, that they go to like one listing for your earrings and like, okay, cool, there's like 6 or 7 shots here. And then they go to another listing for earrings and there's like 3 photos, and you're like, there's some stuff missing. So even
Something's wrong. Yeah. No, I mean, I totally like, excuse me, full disclosure, like there's I was saying to you earlier, like, before the call that like, there's a couple of pieces on my website that still only have one image. I've never
Mm,
gotten around to, taking like more photos or even of it on myself. And like, when I look at the stats on my website, those are the least viewed
mm,
pieces of all of my listings. And they're not even necessarily like buried listings, like way down in the list. It's just like because they only have one listing. And I do think I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I do think that for systems like Google or DuckDuckGo, like any of those, like they do surface products that have more photos because more photos is more relevancy.
mm.
And also for like for anybody who's followed me who knows that I'm a big proponent of alt text in the photos. Like the more photos that you have with more alt text, the more like findable you are. And so I'm looking at the stats of like this one listing that only has one photo, and it's like, why doesn't it get any love? Oh, I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said, I'm sure is totally relevant to,
Hmm.
maybe why that listing isn't getting enough views, and why, maybe it doesn't sell as well. But yeah, everything you said to me totally makes sense. And
Hmm.
it's like when you put your listings out online, you want to make sure that, your customer's taken care of. You want to make sure they
Yeah.
have all the visuals they need, and to really you have to pay attention both to the visuals, because your visuals need to communicate what your description is saying. Like I've come across listings where there's inconsistencies where I look at the photos and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'll look at the description, I'll read it, and I'm like, something's off. Like,
yeah,
they're not speaking to the same thing. So, and your customers are always going to look at your photos first.
They are.
Always.
They're actually like in some cases. So you had mentioned earlier about like, you know, the issue with returns, and like the thing that I've learned after like years of working retail, years of working e-commerce for other businesses and my own, is that there are some people who only shop by photos.
Oh yeah.
And they don't read the description. And so, and like, of course we don't want to encourage that, but like to understand that like there are a lot of people who are just visually shopping.
Yep.
And even at some of these price points, and that's why the more photos are important. But I wanted to get back to something that you said about the branding, because it like reminded me about like, you know, identifying like who you are as a brand is important. Because there's this one designer who like I love and I follow them, and their photos are perfect for them in a way that they would not be for me, because the core value of their brand is like a more like spiritual nature, like kind of like globally spiritual nature. And so a lot of their photographs are of their jewelry like on crystals. And I love that idea, but for me, like that's not a part of my brand at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I won't adopt that because it would kind of convey something that my brand is not. Like I feel like my brand is very like grounded. I'm not a particularly spiritual person, so I can't even like access. I'm like, I don't even know like how that comes together. But when I see her work, I'm like, my God, this is perfect. Like this visually conveys exactly what you're about. And whereas I'm like, I feel like I'm going for like a more like kind of grounded, earthy kind of approach, like a more like hyper realistic approach. And so that's why I make the choices that I do with like the dramatic sunlight and like the plain wood board. But I was like, but I just wanted to kind of say that to indicate that this is what we're talking about when we talk about identify what your brand is, because that's going to lead you to like what your photos might be.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to really think about what feels true and authentic for you, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, you and I know, and I'm sure everybody you work with and talk to, everybody in the maker community knows jewelry is probably the most saturated market.
Totally.
So
yes,
you need to find and figure out what makes you unique and what makes you stand out, because people will buy your pieces, right? But they also are buying you. They're buying into you. They're buying into what you represent. You need to make sure that whatever that is authentic to you and just feels like, you know, is such a great representation of who you are. Because that's the thing, is like people are going to buy your jewelry and stuff, but they're buying into who you are. They're buying into what you represent, and they're buying into the feeling that you're, I hate to kind of say it, but on some level it's true. It's like what you're marketing, like what you're showing them. Because at the end of the day, you need to market your work. So all of this goes into that, because it's all the messaging. You want to be communicating the same message, the same feeling, the same whatever, so that your customers will say, oh my God, I love Sharon's stuff. Like like I want to buy all her jewelry. I have like 20 of her pieces. I've been shopping from her for forever. I remember when she was like just starting out. I mean, these are the things, is like, that's what makes people want to buy. Customers are moved by emotion, and you do that well with your photos, right? With like your lifestyle photos and everything. This is why you're thinking about what props you're using, thinking about the colors, the backgrounds, all of that feeds into your branding. And that's why it's so important to get clear on like who you are, what you represent, what your customer, like who your customer is, right? Because your work is for specific people. Yes, it's for like, you know, everybody or whatever.
Right. But you've got to have that like person in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
who do I want to attract with this?
And that's
Yeah.
why understanding who your customer is so important. But
Mhm.
the other thing too is that can change, right?
Yes.
It can change with like product lines that come out that can be so different than maybe like some of your other stuff, but you're like, hey, I want to put this out, like I really love it. So yeah, a lot of that, I feel like I didn't quite answer the question, but
Well,
I think it's just such a big
it's a big
thing.
question. It's like a big nebulous question because like branding is like the biggest question about like how to get branded photography, like goes all the way back to who are you and what is your brand about? And so you
Yeah.
have to like start with that question before you can answer the question of what does branded photography look like, because it's coming from what your brand is,
Yeah, because
right?
even if somebody said, "Hey, I'm just gonna go hire somebody to photograph my work,"
Mhm.
then cool. But if you're going to somebody who like knows their product photography, they're gonna ask you about backgrounds. They're gonna ask you about who
Yes.
your customer. They're gonna ask you
Mhm.
all those questions because they need to know that to understand what type of photos to take.
Right. Like if you make
So
like super like minimalist like architectural jewelry, like are they going to photograph it on like a bouquet of roses?
right.
Probably not. Like they might go for something more like goes with more with your jewelry, unless like maybe that's what your brand is like romantic but architectural. Like so yeah, you're gonna be responsible for knowing what that is and who you are
Yeah.
as an
And when
artist.
you
So
really get your branding down, and I mean, I'll say just your branding, but it's like when you really understand who you are as, as a creative, as a maker, as a jeweler,
jeweler, yeah, jeweler,
metalsmith.
jewelry
I don't know.
designer. But it's kind of like there's different ways of describing it, but they're all kind of like accurate in their own way depending
Yeah.
on who you are. But jewelry
Yeah.
designer, jeweler, metalsmith, all of those are
Yeah.
applicable. Yeah.
So I feel like when you really know who you are and you are really, you're creating really amazing pieces and you know who your customer is, honestly, it's super easy to sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so easy. It takes some work still, but
I mean, it takes a while to like
but
get to that point, but yeah, but like once you know who your customers are, because like I even notice that like when I'm doing my copywriting, it's like I'm thinking of specific people.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and when you're dialed in, you you have your group, you have your people, and
Mhm.
you can ignore everybody else, you know?
Exactly. I mean, it's like that's and I do remember like my concept for like doing these photos. Like I'll go back to like the original one, which is like my concept for this is like a little bit of drama because that's
Mhm.
what some of my jewelry provides. Like some of it's simple, but some of it's like a little dramatic. And I wanted to like the highlight of like the lighting to kind of convey that, but also that like this is still like down to earth, right? Like so
Yeah.
I was kind of going for like both of those things because that's what I had identified it as my brand. And of course, what's also on brand for me is going too dramatic, which is why we got these lines.
But it's all, and something to kind of just, I want everybody to remember is these are photos. You can always change them.
Yes.
And
And I have.
yeah, and it's like you don't have to be married to these photos. Like you can change these every day. I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend it,
I
but
mean, yeah.
like it's just it's not, it doesn't have, you don't have to be stuck with them if you don't like them or if it doesn't come out the right way, and I always tell my clients like practicing and experimentation is going to get you so far in like improving your photos and really
Yeah.
helping you figure out what works and doesn't work. So I'm always learning as I go, and I'm always like trying to practice and figure out what works and what doesn't work. So to me it's like a never ending process. I mean, I'm not
Mhm.
saying that like you'll be like, oh, I'm like done, but it's just like when you kind of when you understand what you're doing, you understand your products and how to photograph them, it makes the whole process so much easier that it allows you more time to create your work and like do other things in your business. But to me, it's like so worth it because it's the visual of your business. And if you're selling online, you need some pictures for your
You
customers.
You definitely do. And it's I also like kind of wanted to like have this talk with you too, because I know that this is like the task that a lot of people consider really arduous
Yes.
or mysterious. And I hope that we've like demystified a little bit of that today, like showing like the tools that I use, which are like extremely basic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop sharing this for a moment, but
Yeah.
yeah, but I like part of the reason I wanted to do this is like people really struggle because they're like they know what needs to be done, but like making it accessible, making it easier. It's like so I
Yeah.
really appreciated hearing from you. Like the thing to make it easier is like have a setup, do it the same way.
Yeah.
Stop
Yeah.
thinking about it. And I'm like, yes. Like and for like anybody who's a jewelry designer who's listening to this, like if you've ever done production jewelry, just apply those same techniques to doing photography. It's like same tools, same way every time. Same, like even when it's like creative, right? Like you get your creative background, you get your creative
Yeah.
props, but it's like same angle, same way,
Check.
same lighting, same background every time. And then you don't have to think about it as much. So it's kind of like I'm kind of sitting here thinking like, this is like production jewelry principles. It's like boom, 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 like set it up and just knock it all out.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I've learned is that just with anything, I mean, anything that you're trying to learn and improve it's so easy. I think, especially when you're first starting and trying to figure things out, is we overcomplicate things. We make things
Yes.
so much more than they need to be. And a lot of times we just need to like really scale back and like just focus on like one little thing, right? So if you're wanting to improve your photos and you're thinking, oh, I gotta change everything, I don't like my background, I don't got my lighting, all this stuff, then just focus on your backgrounds. Just like focus
Yeah.
on, okay, let me like see if I can figure out a background I like, and then, pick one and then move on to the next thing and then start working on that. Like, you don't have to. I think that's the thing, is this just can be a very overwhelming process that you sort of don't know like where to start. So just start on one thing, and start on the thing that's probably going to be the easiest, which is generally going to be a background. It's going to be pretty easy, but it's a process. It's an ongoing journey. And if I was struggling and I was taking photos, I was trying to sell my photo products online, and I was struggling, like, that to me should tell you it's not just you. Like, I had a really hard time,
It's
but
not.
teaching, like practicing and trying to figure this stuff out, I thought, okay, this is doable. Like, I just needed to spend time practicing and doing this, and I was able to get good results. So I was like, I needed to share this with people because I know it's hard, and it doesn't have to be hard.
And I really appreciate it. I think that brings us to the end of our questions, but I just wanted to say, Imelda, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
SunsetShutterbugStudio.com is
It's just SunsetShutterbug.com. I added the studio parts on the website.
Okay, got it.
It's still SunsetShutterbug.com.
And you can also find her on Instagram.
Yes.
And I'll be posting this video to YouTube in a little while and sharing it with my audience. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. I feel like, well, first of all, you've sold me on the tripod. I'm gonna figure it out. That'll be like the one thing I figure out. I'm not gonna figure out a new camera, but I am gonna figure out a tripod because I am gonna make this easier on me.
Well, at least tripods are a little less complicated than cameras. I hope it'll be less complicated than
I think I'm pretty sure. I think so. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. This was super fun. I loved being able to answer questions, and I really hope that if there's anything that people watching this like walk away with, is that you can do this. Like, if I can do it, and I didn't have anybody teaching me how to do this other than I was watching videos, like, you can 110% do this. And to me, this is, I've already said this, but it's just like, this is such an incredible, important aspect of your business. And if you really want to grow it and increase your sales and, open up new doors for your business, like, you can't sleep on not learning how to photograph your products. It's like such an amazing investment.
Yes.
And is so worth it. And you can totally do it. And, you know, you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. Love talking to people and helping them. And
well, I know you
yeah,
helped me. So
I'm glad. I'm glad.